Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today across YouTube, X, LinkedIn, and Facebook Live for what promises to be a timely conversation on applied dementia research careers. I'm Adam Smith. I'm the Program Director for Dementia Researcher, and I'm delighted to be hosting this session featuring my brilliant colleagues who I'm going to bring onto the screen now. First of all, we have Dr. Sarah Fearn. There is Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
We have Professor Cathy Murphy, Cathy's there, and we have Dr. Paul Campbell. And Sarah and Cathy are co-authors of a brand new report exploring the landscape of career development in applied research. And also joining us, Dr. Paul Campbell, who is a DEM-COM fellow from Keele University, who will share his own experiences of navigating that research landscape. As our regular followers will know, Dementia Researcher exists to encourage new researchers, help sharing, peer support, collaboration, and to help retain people in research. So this topic is one which is particularly close to our hearts. And today's discussion will focus on the findings and recommendations from that NIHR ARC Wessex report, which maps the current state of applied dementia research careers from early to senior career stages. The report identifies gaps in support, opportunities for growth, and the strategies for creating a more sustainable, inclusive, and impactful research workforce. And Paul is going to talk about what it's really like to work in that space, what inspired him, the challenges he's faced, and what keeps him committed to applied research as one of the brilliant DEM-COM fellows who so many of you will be familiar with through our Minds in Motion podcast series. So whether you're a researcher, a policymaker, funder, or simply curious about what we can or how we can build a future for dementia research, we're thrilled to have you with us today. So let me bring up on the screen and just talk you through the program and what you can expect. So here's the program. So first of all, we're going to hear from Cathy and Sarah, who are going to talk us through the findings of their report. And what I'm going to do is, while they're doing that, I'll flash up a QR code on the screen that can take you away to that report as well, so you can download that and have it as a companion alongside while we hear from Cathy and Sarah. Then I'm going to have a chat with Paul about the careers and his practical experience of working in applied research. And then we're going to we're going to have some deeper questions for our guests, which I'll put to them. And we'll also have a chance for you to put your live questions to the authors of this report and to Paul as well, for anybody who wants to know more. So get your questions in at any time. You can post those in the comments on X, on LinkedIn, and of course on YouTube. So that's the program. But I should probably, I don't know if you already have introductions at the start of your talks, but I don't know. Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself first of all while we do this?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So my name is Sarah Fearn. I'm a Senior Research Fellow in Ageing and Dementia at ARC Wessex, NIHR ARC Wessex. And so I do also have a background in doing applied research in dementia.
And Cathy? Cathy's out. We should qualify. Cathy's had some connectivity issues, but hopefully we've resolved them.
Hi all, my name's
Cathy.
I'm Professor of Content.
Oh no. That's the start of things to come.
Rather glitchy. Yes, I'm Professor of Continence in the Bladder and Bowel.
And Paul.
Hi everybody. So I'm Paul Campbell, and I have a split role. So I work at an NHS Foundation Trust called Midlands Partnership up in the Midlands, and I also work with Keele University. And my DEM-COM fellowship is through the ARC West Midlands, and I've had a sort of on and off relationship with dementia research for a number of years. And as you'll hear later on, the DEM-COMs really give me a bit of a boost in that direction.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, well, I think that's enough of an introduction and enough from me. I'm going to hand over now to Cathy and Sarah, who are going to take us through their presentation.
Thanks, Adam. The title of this project was Mapping Career Development Opportunities in Applied Dementia Research. It was a one-year project carried out by myself and Cathy, both of us part of NIHR ARC Wessex, based in Southampton. Yeah, please, Adam, the next one. This was commissioned by the DHSC, this project. It was focusing on the career development opportunities in dementia-focused applied health and care research, so only applied research, not biomedical or basic science, covering England from 2019 to 2025. And we based the project on the NIHR Research Capacity Development Framework. So we held 4 separate workshops based on the current landscape, people and skills in this area, research opportunities, and the current environment. We held 4 big workshops where we had the contributors from that list, which I won't read out. But we also then gathered data from other contributors. So we basically went to people who might fund this research, people involved in this research, and we had public contributors with lived experience of dementia, involved a dementia support group, and of course ECRs in the field as well. Thanks, Adam. So what we're going to do to divvy this presentation up very quickly is that I'll just go over what we found, so the context and the challenges in the current area, and then Cathy will go over the recommendations that we then drew up based on those context and challenges. So first of all, in the area of landscape, which really covered funding opportunities and how engaged funders were in this area, we found that investment was increasing. It's currently higher than it has been historically. There are excellent initiatives, including the DEM-COM programme, the 3 Schools Dementia Research Programme, and Network Plus initiatives, amongst others. And these larger combined funding calls had positive benefits in many areas, from the reach to the ability to create larger networks. So a lot of positive things going on. There was some challenges, however, in the current dementia-specific funding seemed to be focused more on earlier career stages, so really focusing on ECRs rather than mid-career and senior researchers. That it was felt that these funding calls could be sporadic or unpredictable, that there might be fewer opportunities to expand and extend existing projects. So maybe fewer opportunities to look at like implementation or evaluation further down that research pathway. And we also found that awards were not geographically spread. The exception to that was the DEM-COM programme, which through the ARCs around the country was spread evenly. But other dementia-specific funding calls tended to be quite geographically clustered. Cathy.
Yes, so following directly on from the context and the challenges, the recommendations that we made were that there's been a lot of investment in the early career stages, and that needs to be expanded to all career stages through to mid and later stages to get that pipeline running through. You should try as far as possible to ensure that funding is predictable and people know what's coming down the line that they might be able to apply for in the coming years. That funders should consider looking at projects that transition from feasibility or small-scale exploratory work through to full-scale evaluation, potentially including implementation, because there it was seen that there wasn't a huge amount in that area that led to full-scale work. We also recognise the benefits of combining funding calls, so perhaps the NIHR fund working together with some of the other funders in the area, and also utilising the NIHR infrastructures, including ARC, to support that geographic spread that the DEM-COM fellows have achieved. Back to you, Sarah.
Thank you. Adam? Brilliant. Okay, so then the next area that we looked at was focusing on people and skills, so whether this was like an attractive career pathway, and the types of people that were in this area, how to attract and retain them. So we found that there are increased opportunities for health and care professionals. The DEM-COM programme had attracted a really diverse group of researchers, and it avoided competition with basic and biomedical applications. So there were a lot of positive advantages to the way that the DEM-COM programme had recruited new researchers to the area. In general, we found that the applied dementia researchers tended to have a diverse research background. So not necessarily coming directly from kind of dementia care or dementia research, but being drawn from lots of different associated fields. We found that the quality and quantity of supervision in the area was variable, and this was partly due to a relatively small pool of applied dementia experts. This led to kind of a relative shortage, so not an overall shortage, but a relative shortage. If you think that the number of ECRs in this area is growing, and actually the number of applied dementia experts is comparatively smaller, then we found that there was a kind of shortage in terms of supervisors, mentors, maybe in expert panels, that kind of thing. Doctoral training programs and centres were thought by funders especially to have more rounded and high quality training than individual awards, maybe than what individual award holders received. And the UK Dementia Research Institute did cohort-based training in this area, and that was something that funders were interested in maybe rolling out further. Now, Alzheimer's Society did identify a potential issue. They have combined their funding calls so that applied research and biomedical and basic applications are all joined together and go to the same panel. And since they've done that, they've identified some issues with that, focused on possibly the lack of not a clear plan of feasibility for applied research applications. And also my mind's gone blank. What was the other one, Cathy? No, hang on. The knowledge mobilisation. Sorry, that there was a weakness in the plans for knowledge mobilisation following the research. So potential issues within specifically the applications of applied research. Next slide, please, Helen. So we although there were increased opportunities for health and care professionals, there were some difficulties in attracting and retaining them. So issues reaching these groups, workforce issues. We know that many people working in the area of dementia, that there's a lack of capacity in that area anyway. So possibly an inability to buy time out, or a reluctance from managers to let people go, give them the time to do research. And less of an organisational culture, especially within kind of areas of social care than within other areas that are more hospital-based or university-based, and a kind of general uncertainty for practitioners on how to combine their practice with research. It was felt that there wasn't a particularly clear pathway for applied dementia research. The ECRs that we spoke to, many of those felt unsure on how to identify next opportunities in dementia-specific research. The diversity of researcher backgrounds had many, many positives, but it also may not encourage specialisation. So if people are coming from other fields, they can also go back to those fields and maybe not build that specialisation. The lack of senior researchers affected mentoring, supervising and reviewing. Host organisations, their training and development opportunities could be variable. The ECRs highlighted, and I thought this was interesting, we thought this was very interesting, that as the funding calls are now kind of more specific about whether they are for clinical and practice-based researchers or whether they are more methodological, ECRs identified that there could be a lot better maybe communication or peer learning between those two groups. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, Alzheimer's Society did feel that there were poor understandings of feasibility or inadequate knowledge mobilisation plans in some applied research applications. Thanks, Cathy.
Thank you. So the recommendations coming in this people and skills area, some of them are fairly generic and could be relevant to other areas of applied research, but some are more specific to the applied dementia area. So one recommendation was to promote research opportunities for healthcare professionals, social care practitioners and AHPs through case studies and improving communication on what's available to help attract researchers from other fields of research. Another recommendation, which is common across probably all areas of research, is the request for longer funding periods and contracts to support the attractiveness of moving into the area. One fairly straightforward one was a request on increased clarity on the suitability of different opportunities for particular career stages. And again, another probably fairly generic recommendation was to allocate time, bridging, funding, and so on to help people secure their next stage of funding. More specifically to the applied dementia area, because there has been this investment in the early, particularly in early career researchers, was now to provide more support to mid and later career researchers to become mentors and supervisors and reviewers for the next batch of early career researchers coming through, and to support that skill development. Training on moving from project feasibility through to full-scale evaluations and improved knowledge mobilization was thought to would be beneficial. And as Sarah said, improving knowledge sharing between clinical and non-clinical researchers in the area. And then finally, improving opportunities for mentorship, including within early career researchers' career development plans. Right, back to you, Sarah.
Thanks. And so the third area was research opportunities, which covered whether there were research programs available for early career researchers in this area, and also PPIE. So the NIHR program grants obviously have opportunities for ECRs to apply as PI, and the combined funding calls that we mentioned earlier, they have increased the emphasis on first-time PIs, so encouraging people to be PI for the first time. The 3 Schools programme has actively encouraged ECRs to be PI, and the DEM-COM programme provides development and training for ECRs to actually become chief investigator. So there's also increasing willingness amongst funders to consider equivalent experience to boost ECRs, maybe before they have the research experience, but ensuring that professional experience also counts. There are 2 NIHR policy research units for dementia and neurodegeneration, which are increasing the opportunities for applied research related directly to policy making. And everyone involved in the research really felt that PPIE was well developed in this area, that funding calls encourage public contributors to be included both as applicants and throughout the entire research process. Thanks, Adam. But there were some challenges. So although funders felt there were opportunities out there for ECIs to be first PI for the first time, many ECIs found it difficult to identify which grants were open to this, first time PI, and also which grants they could apply for without a permanent contract, because many are on fixed term contracts. There was, whilst there are the policy research units, many people that are doing practice-based research, they obviously may want to influence broader policy making, and that could be unclear or challenging. PPIE very well developed, but is challenging and needs to be recognised as such. So it can be challenging to involve people with cognitive impairment and also their carers who are experiencing high care responsibilities. So a lot of considerations related to that. The taboos around dementia and the stigma maybe within certain communities can inhibit the diversity of public contributors, and also the difficulty in maintaining contact with public contributors between grants, and also during bid development when there may not be resources, or researchers may not be aware of what resources are available for that. Thanks, Cathy.
Okay, so again, following on from what Sarah said there, it's important that funders do make it explicitly clear which awards are suitable for ECRs to lead or co-lead. and in particular for those who don't yet have permanent contracts. Where the research proposals particularly are practice-based, again, it's supporting this need to get the research into policy and into practice, and researchers should be supported by units in host organisations where possible that specialise in moving research into policy impact. And then the final three recommendations are around the importance of the having meaningful PPI, but also recognising that it is resource intensive to carry out meaningful PPI in this field, and that should be recognised. And ideally providing additional sources of funding to support researchers in between grants to undertake this meaningful PPI.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, and the final area we looked at was the environment, which included kind of how supportive the environment was, EDI networks, that kind of thing. So we found that funders were increasingly aware of how important the host environment support was. So there are like greater sections and applications, there's greater questioning by the funders on what support that host environment is going to provide. Some researchers work within a cohort while others are more isolated. Looking at EDI, we found that in the area of applied dementia research, there are more women than men, and many researchers join it later in their career. So they may have had like a professional practice-based career and then joined it later or moved from another field. So many people joining later on. The DEM-COM programme attracts a really diverse group of researchers, and funders themselves do have EDI strategies, but don't have specific schemes at present. There are a lot of networks in this area, applied dementia research, as I'm sure lots of you are aware. So you've got special interest groups and so on, and navigating that is obviously another potential issue. But the DEM-COM programme has created a really successful nationwide network for ECRs. There's no NIHR incubator or coordination group at the moment for dementia, though funders and the NIHR did say that that's a possibility for the future. And Dementia Researcher, with Adam, obviously provides information on funding and career opportunities, events, training, interviews, and podcasts. Next slide, please. Thank you. So having a greater female workforce may include having more career breaks or caring responsibilities potentially. The older age of researchers means they may be less able to move location to pursue opportunities as other early career researchers may be. Some ECRs reported that researchers who are not health and care professionals by background might be losing out to the calls that are aimed specifically at practitioners. And ECRs did feel that whilst things are going well in the area of diversity, that more could be done is to encourage people from less favourable socio-economic backgrounds. As I mentioned, there's a lot of networks, but it can be tricky for ECRs to navigate, identify which are the most useful networks. And the network that's been created by the DEM-COM programme, with I think it's approximately about 70 fellows and others nationwide around the country, there are now discussions on how this can be maintained moving forwards when the programme finishes. Thanks, Cathy.
So the recommendations recognise the challenges and context that Sarah's just described. So it's making sure funders think about the specific challenges of the workforce in this area that is predominantly female and older, how to accommodate carer needs and so on, but also how to attract currently underrepresented groups, including men, ethnic minorities, and people from a diverse range of socio-economic backgrounds. And it's also ensuring that, and to help with this, ensuring that people and funding opportunities are available across the country to help with that. And it was also recognised that that an online directory of the networks and the support opportunities would be really useful, but making sure that that is sustainable and kept up to date is crucial to its usefulness. And then finally, to think about how the DEM-COM network can be maintained once the current programme finishes in March 26. So that's the end of the 4 sections. And so shall I just do the summary, Sarah? Is that, yeah, okay. So we had some key recommendations that we came out with, some overall recommendations. So I think it's really well recognised that DEM-COM 1's been successful and has worked well, and the cohort approach has really added value and supported interdisciplinary working across the different geographic regions in the country. And this could be replicated in ARC 2, which is, the applications for that are ongoing at the moment, to continue to bring people from different regions and different disciplines into the area, and importantly to keep them in the field as well. And we also recognise that the DEM-COM 1 graduates, the people that will be finishing next year, are going to have a wide range of needs. They're from different professional backgrounds, different academic disciplines, and we need opportunities that are going to support that wide range of people to stay in the field. And this could include specific applied dementia research calls for a wide range of disciplines. And funders should also make it clear in their calls what career stage these various opportunities are aimed at. Next slide, Adam, last slide, I think it is. Thanks. So what we want to avoid, and what the DEM-COM fellowships have been really useful in, is avoiding siloed working and building up these really meaningful but also sustainable networks. And things like the SPINDI Network Plus could be an opportunity to continue supporting that. Also, we think it's important to promote case studies of researchers particularly those who've successfully combined practice, whether in healthcare or social care, and research, to give some reflection of the really varied pathways that are available to people and what have worked for different people in different areas. And then finally, to provide current and future cohort with support for the ECRs to develop leadership skills and transition into chief investigator roles, and for MCRs to develop their experience with the whole range of skills there to support the next cohort of ECRs to come through. So that's the end of our presentation.
Thank you very much. That was fascinating. I'm going to come to Paul next, but I've got a couple of questions I'd like to pick up on now because I think they're quite timely. Was there anything particularly surprising or unexpected that you discovered through this process that you didn't expect at the start? That was Sarah.
It's a good question. I think one of the most interesting things, and I think Cathy will agree with me because she was a driving force in this, was identifying what was specifically different about applied dementia research compared to applied research in general. Because I think that is really what this boils down to, that how can we make sure people choose applied dementia research maybe rather than the other areas, or what challenges do we specifically have? So I think finding out the challenges in terms of attracting people from clinical and practice-based professions, or looking at the workforce that we currently have and how that is skewed maybe towards more female, older researchers. I think. And finally, that finding from Alzheimer Society that they felt that there were some clear gaps in applied research applications to their funding calls. I mean, obviously, they're one of the biggest funders for dementia research. So for them to be able to identify that they felt these were issues for applied research applications, and that maybe applied research applications aren't doing as well as basic or biomedical for these reasons. I think those were the things that I found really important that stood out for me. But Cathy, did you?
Yeah.
As you've alluded to, Sarah, it's the fact that dementia is this, it cuts across. Sorry, I can see I'm glitching still, and I apologies. Dementia cuts across so many other themes, and that researchers come from such downs. And the importance of keeping people within the field, and that's a challenge because an awful lot of these researchers who've come into the field have the opportunity to leave again because they've got a lot of transferable skills, and it's how we keep people in the field.
So it's that kind of attracting people into applied research isn't necessarily more of a challenge. It's particularly keep retaining people in dementia, which of course I know is a little bit unfair to other diseases, but we're biased perhaps. Were there any trends you noticed in who enters and who leaves, particularly on dementia? Were people attracted to dementia because driven by things like that new DEM-COM fellowship, and then if they've left or moved on, have they stayed in dementia so far, or is this driven by funding or personal motivations, do you think?
So there was some interesting data which is in the long report where we spoke to DEM-COM fellows. We did a quick VVOC survey where we asked them, before your DEM-COM fellowship, did you feel you were a applied dementia researcher? And I think it was less than 50% did. Do you now feel you are an applied dementia researcher? Yes, it's now up to like 99%. There was one person who still wasn't sure. And then, do you want to stay in this field? That was 100% want to. And then you asked, okay, what does it depend on? And then I think 95% depended on funding. So I think we can safely say that the DEM-COM fellowship provided a clear funding, nice time period for people to join this. They're convinced, they love the area. I mean, Paul can say whether he does or not in a moment, but in general, they're committed to this area, and it's just having those opportunities, I think. But what others?
So that old adage of "build it and they will come" absolutely has played out in this instance, which I guess also as well shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, that was the same when we had things like the NIHR, the themed calls for dementia and things. The amount of there's got to be a correlation between the amount of investment you put into an area and the amount of researchers it attracts, which perfectly segues us through to talking to you, Paul. Because as you said at the start, dementia hasn't always been your thing. What brought you to applied dementia research?
Okay, I mean, it's a bit of a long story, and obviously I'm speaking as N=1 here, so I can't be representative of the other DEM-COM fellows, of course, who are a mixed bag of wonderful people. I did my PhD 20 years ago in a dementia project, and then moved because I just moved to where the funding was to move into a different research area, which was primary care health and musculoskeletal pain. And it was many years later that I had an opportunity to develop dementia research again, and was successful in sort of getting a small group together at Keele, getting some funding and doing a project. But then as sort of the way things happen, I moved to an NHS trust, and part of my role there was to develop social care research engagement with practice, and then lo and behold, the DEM-COM fellow came along, and the ARC West Midlands had a focus on social care and dementia, and so I applied with my other colleagues, Chris Poyner and Sue Molesworth, to go for that. So it's been a bit of a roundabout, but I've found it to be a great opportunity, but it is caveated with some of the points that have been made by Sarah and Cathy.
And so what has that DEM-COM fellowship enabled you to do that you otherwise might not have been able to?
Yeah, I mean, obviously having funding, I was or I am part funded on it, so 60% of my time. It's gave me time. So I've always had a love for dementia research and progressed it through being involved with it alongside other funded projects that are not dementia related. So it's kind of been a bit of a sort of research hobby, if you like, to try and keep it going. Having the fellowship has enabled me to have the time to actually develop research ideas, explore, and have time to go for funding. So it's been great to have that space without having your sort of senior line managers saying, what are you doing this for extra? They know that you've got that dedicated time to do that. The only thing I would say is that with the previous dementia work, it took about 5 years to get a project up and running and delivered. And that was just a small project, really, with a few satellite sort of research work. So 2 years is really a very short time to get anything off the ground. It's a wonderful and most welcome opportunity, and I'm sure everybody that's been involved would say that. But you just need that little bit more time to develop. So I would say I'm only just finding my feet in terms of understanding the full landscape, and the opportunities to meet with the other fellows has been wonderful. And I think that's where most of the sparks and ideas and networking happens. But 2 years goes by so quickly that I feel I'm only just starting to know those people well. And that's we've got another year left, of course, but I know that will go by in a blink of an eye. So it's been a wonderful opportunity, but there's room for continuation, and I hope DEM-COM 2 does happen.
And did that funding did that just buy your time, or did that also give you money to actually do things as well?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the drawbacks of the fellowship, is that it bought out fellows' time to do it, but there was no research funding costs allocated. So you've got the time, but you've got to beg, borrow, and steal to actually do research and get it done. So, for example, a lot of our stuff is focused on social workers, social care practice, who are really hard pressed, and without having incentives or opportunities to buy out their time to be involved, it makes it more of a challenge. So having additional funding would have been helpful in that way. But again, I can't complain.
No.
Because,
I mean, that comes up time and time again. And you're not the only one. I mean, our biomedical colleagues say exactly the same thing, that I think it's a little bit of a career misnomer, that you think that you put all your effort into getting that fellowship and then suddenly realize that whilst you now have your time funded to do something, you actually, you need to start writing grants almost immediately that you've got your fellowship to actually have research funding then. And I guess increasingly funders have picked up on that 2 and 3 year fellowships is quite shorter. Certainly, I think, Alzheimer's Research UK race against dementia, and I think Alzheimer's Society now have added on extra that fellowships can be up to 5 years, which of course makes such a difference. I don't know, where does Cathy, you'll be closest to where the NIHR sits on the length of its fellowships. Is the NIHR moving in that direction as well to lengthen those? I asked quick. Cathy's not avoiding me. I suspect she's froze. Sarah, do you know? I'm guessing not.
I don't know. And I would have liked Cathy's response, actually, because we have obviously been in discussions with the NIHR about the implications of the study and the findings. And I have to say, I haven't been privy to any conversations about the length. I mean, we've been talking about making certain calls dementia specific in order to get more people into the area. But I haven't, unfortunately, heard any conversations about also extending the period to make it more attractive.
Yeah.
Just to interject there, Adam, I am aware of a couple of colleagues that are on 5-year advanced fellowships for dementia. So they are out there, and obviously they are NIHR funded, so there must be a recognition of the need for that sort of length.
Well, and I guess that gives you time as well to build, because we know that the grant process is so long that, I think generally the advice is that you should start thinking about your grant applications, anything up to 3-6 months before the deadline, and then you've got to submit, and then you've got to wait for the reply, and then the contracting, and it's a year-long process, isn't it? So, you know, I think if you're encouraged, I mean, I guess do applied researchers particularly apply for things like the research for patient benefit, the NIHR's RFPB grants, and some of the other charities, maybe Alzheimer's Society or the ESRC, the Economic Social Research Council grants and things have been particularly useful. So, I mean, you've talked a little bit there, Paul, about how being a part of this cohort has changed your journey. I'm interested to know briefly what you're working on right now and what parts of the report particularly resonated with you.
Yeah, I mean, current work. As I said, I was involved in dementia research prior to the fellowship, so I managed to bring some baggage with me, and that included work where we've been looking at Keele at identifying prognostic markers of dementia using electronic health record data. So that's quite a substantial piece of work that's been going on, really to give an idea of what the tipping points are for outcomes such as being hospitalized or being placed in a nursing home or mortality. And there's quite a lot of work to be done on that. So that's something that we're hoping to build on. So I've been working on that. I also had a sort of collaborative role with the Association for Dementia Studies group at Worcester, who've just completed a wonderful research for social care project on providing information about personal care for people that have got dementia, solely needed by carers for those that maybe have advanced dementia that require personal care. And they've produced a brilliant set of resources for families and people living with dementia. So I've been involved in that, and also currently we've just started a project looking at social care and integrated care within dementia. So looking at social workers and what role they have and understanding their perspectives and perceptions. Also where dementia fits within the integrated care arena, which is on board now. So we've got the integrated care systems and ICBs. So that's just started, and that'll go on for the remaining time of the fellowship, really as a way to identify what the next research questions are.
I mean, that's such huge topics. I mean, the idea of identifying the tipping point and how you can avoid that and interventions you could do is huge. I mean, that's that's the kind of thing that you'd see an entire Alzheimer's Society program grant covering, isn't it? There's so much potential on that topic alone.
I mean, that's where we want to go. Obviously, there's huge restrictions around the information you can get from electronic health records. So we recognise that there's other parts of data that might be used as well, including adult social care. So that's another project that I'm working on to look at how that could be utilised for research in a better way. But yeah, I mean, people who get a diagnosis want to know what their prognosis is, and clinicians and practitioners are not too informed about giving that. If we can identify markers that identify if they're modifiable markers, then we can change someone's trajectory. We know there's a huge variation in the course of some of these dementia, with some progressing for many, many years without any problems and others not. So having a way of sort of mapping that out would be great. And yeah, if anybody's willing to give us a program grant funding, that we'd only be too happy to take that on. But that's a long-term ambition.
And I suppose just to bring it back to report, this is the challenges that I guess many of those, when the NIHR decided to invest with Alzheimer's Society, we should add that Alzheimer's Society are a partner in the DEM-COM program. But when that push on dementia, particularly in applied research, driven through the DEM-COM program with Alzheimer's Society started, it's clearly been incredible at bringing a focus to dementia within that space. And I suppose what this report hopefully does now is to help ensure that doesn't now say, right, okay, that was a one-off thing. It is to understand whether that's what the legacy of that program is and what shape and form any kind of next steps and continuation come. Because I'm guessing you, Paul, now face this challenge when your fellowship runs out. You're now looking for your next batch of funding. Do you think dementia needs special aid? Is it enough now that you can go, okay, I've got my experience, I've had this fellowship, that's put me in a great position to apply for something that's disease agnostic to one of the normal programs? Does dementia still need that focus?
I mean, personally speaking, I think the focus is really needed in dementia, because the numbers are going to rise and the pressures are going to get more as we go on, in pressures in health and social care, more so in social care for sure. There's been a lot of concentration, of course, on lab-based and bench work to identify modifying drugs, and there's been some successes now, which is absolutely wonderful and welcome, and anything that can prevent or delay is brilliant. But we're still left with people who live with dementia and their families that feel totally unsupported especially in a social care environment where there are so much funding cuts and pressures, that it's not the way that it should be in the UK.
And also, of course, what we know is from this first generation of anti-amyloid treatments and things, they don't cure the disease. They just extend life with a level of cognitive impairment. So what we are going to see are people potentially for the next 5-10 years actually living with dementia for longer, albeit at a slower progression or at a fairly static level, which is low level. So putting even more pressure on social care and healthcare systems to retain people, to be able to support people living with the disease.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as I sort of mentioned about the pressures on social care, and that's why there's some excellent practices in the UK from social care, but because they're not connected up in the same way as healthcare, a lot of practices go on unnoticed. So research is needed to join these people together, to formulate the best practice moving forward, and to put evidence around that, because I guess that's the kind of the area that's missing or a bit fuzzy within social care, is the evidence base around it. So that for my interest in that area, then yes, of course, there is an absolute need for more research. And, we can't, as you say, rely on drugs alone. And that means that we've still got an increasing cohort of people that live with dementia that require help and support. And research is needed to improve that.
So Sarah, just let's go back to talking about the report. We've got about 10 minutes left. So anybody who's watching, just a reminder that you can ask questions, post your comments and thoughts on this topic as well, and do post your questions if you have a question for Sarah, who of course is one of the authors of the report, which I will I've given you a link to in the notes down there, but I'll also flash up that QR code again. So you can see that in the top corner of your screen up there. If you can take a screen grab if you're watching on mobile, and just tap the QR code, it'll take you to our webpage where we've published the report and some comments on that as well. So Sarah, what practical steps do you think institutions should take now to support those kind of mid-career researchers? I know that a lot of the applied researchers, particularly in the UK, of course, we're talking very much about the UK, or even not even the UK, quite particularly England here, aren't we? And most of them are based in one of the applied research collaborations. So you're kind of talking to your colleagues, I guess, more in this. But for those, because they are still institution-based, as we said, Paul's in Kiel, and we know that, those up in the Northwest are in Liverpool, and you're in Southampton. What do you think those institutions can be doing to help applied researchers rather than passing the responsibility over to these ARCs?
Yeah, I think it's a partnership. I think you've kind of just mentioned, like, what do the host organisations do and what do the ARCs do? But I think there needs to be a good level of working together. I think Paul is as well about how not just the DEM-COM program wasn't just about individuals, like individual fellows. It was about building a kind of culture, and it is university based, but it includes the NHS, it includes the arts, it includes everyone. Building a research culture around dementia research, and so creating dementia research groups, aging and dementia groups, those kind of things. And universities can definitely support with that. Giving the resources, and I don't just mean money. I mean like a web page and a room and whatever else they can provide to support those kind of networks. I also think one thing that came up is that there's a lot of mid-career researchers that do feel ready for the next step. And on the one hand, there's the funding, but on the other hand, there's the experiences. So there's getting experience in things like supervising, mentoring, reviewing. And I think, again, universities have a role to play in that, to facilitate and encourage that as well. But yeah, I don't think it's either or. I really think, everyone we spoke to was so keen to impress upon us how important cohorts and networks were compared to individual researchers. And similarly, I think that the people that can facilitate that also need to work together to do it.
I couldn't agree more. I've had the opportunity to obviously, we've been recording this Minds in Motion podcast series with DEM-COM fellows. I've had the chance to meet with many of them at their events, and I sit on the program. So I kind of know a little bit more than most. And I've never come across a cohort that seems to have so successfully gelled people together who are based so spread out across the country, yet they all know each other. They all know each other's area of work. The researchers in Kent working down there know what the people in Liverpool are doing. They have a connection to them. They talk with each other, which I don't think happens in other areas. Obviously there are exceptions, like in the DR, the Dementia Research Institute and things, which are one institute spread across other organizations. But I think DEM-COM has been really great at doing that. I think copying that model of how that's worked into other areas of dementia would be really beneficial, which actually takes me, as part of the report, did you have a look for any learning outside of England? I know you were tasked very specifically with evaluating where we are, but are there any lessons to be learned internationally from this?
Unfortunately, that wasn't part of the report, and so I don't think I can really comment on that. I don't think. I'm just thinking whether it came up in conversation, but no, I don't think we did draw upon any examples internationally for this.
Well, if any of our audience are watching and you work in applied research outside of England, I'd love to know your thoughts on whether you are well supported. Are there some great examples of communities or work elsewhere in the world that we could learn from? So do drop those in the comments as well. And Sarah, let's just talk about representation for a minute. You mentioned that you found it more women came into this particular line of work. How do we better ensure that funding researchers under-researched kind of institutions or regions, or making sure that we can improve representation in applied research?
Yeah, I think it ties into a couple of things you've said earlier. I think representation, the geographic spread, and making things dementia specific are all tied together, if you know what I mean. If you are putting dementia specific opportunities equally distributed around the country, I think you are halfway there to improving things. It was quite interesting, actually, because just to go on a tangent for a moment, because we did speak to people with dementia and people who support people with dementia, and they had quite a nice perspective on this. Because of they all said, no, we don't mind if it's all women, we don't mind who it is, but they said so long as, and there were some priorities, and one thing was they said so long as the research that is being done is not localized and specific to that local area. They're very aware that services differ across the country, situations differ across the country, and so yes, you can work with me down here in Hampshire, but how do I know whether that's going to work with Paul up in Kiel? And so again, bringing it back to let's make sure this is spread. Let's make sure that people have connections, that these research projects aren't isolated in one geographic location, but we're building these networks and making sure our research is generalizable. And the other thing I would say is that in terms of representation, yes, we have the female issue, but also obviously things related to ethnicity or socioeconomic background. And a lot of people had observed that whilst there are improvements at the ECR level, unfortunately, things are worse at the senior level. So there aren't the role models. And so I think that's going to be a gradual process, but one that we need to keep an eye on and make sure that does progress and as rapidly as possible. And it is about moving people through the pathway, maybe at a more accelerated rate, and giving out those case studies and those examples, maybe more. Because people did say that, yeah, at those expert level, there was a bigger diversity and issue.
And I suppose that's where other initiatives to try and I mean, I'm aware of a few, within the NIHR to attract undergrads, particularly as well. I'm involved in an undergraduate kind of roadshow.
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
Sorry. Smart speaker intervening. I wouldn't expect you to. There's an undergrad initiative at the moment to try and attract people, and we've been particularly moving that to places where there is underrepresentation of people coming from student nurses, OTs, physios, and allied health professions into research, who we know that many people coming from that clinical research might step across into applied research with a clinical background. In fact, a lot of the DEM-COM fellows actually have clinical backgrounds in psychology and occupational therapy and things like that. I've kind of lost my point. Oh, but also as well then to maybe try and draw upon people who've already got clinical careers who are at a later, more senior stage to bring them across. But again, that comes back to funding. We're nearly out of time. We've got a minute and a half left. We haven't had any questions from the audience, so I'm guessing that's because we've been so brilliantly comprehensive in answering everything you could have possibly asked. But if you think of something later and you're watching this recorded, by all means, you can drop us an email to dementiaresearcher@ucl.ac.uk or put that comment in the chat, and I'll make sure that those comments or questions find their way to Sarah, Cathy and Paul, and we'll get you replies to those. If you have a career question or a challenge, of course, Dementia Researcher also has our Solutions Lab service where you can submit questions either with your name or anonymously, and we find the perfect person to answer that question. So if you have a career question or a research question, you can put that into the Solutions Lab. You'll find a link on dementiaresearcher.nihr.ac.uk on our homepage. What are the next steps, Sarah? Where do we go from here? Your reports come out. There's a bunch of recommendations. Do you now have that usual challenge that researchers do in stepping back or following up on it? Obviously, doing things like this live stream alone is a positive next step. What comes next?
So I think we were lucky in that because it was commissioned by the DHSC and we had a lot of engagement from funders in the process, and I mean the entire 12-month process, not even just speaking to me once, but repeatedly taking part and providing information. I think hopefully making sure that it does have influence might be slightly easier. So we've already had follow-up meetings with the DHSC, with the NIHR, and there are discussions. Like I say, I can only make recommendations, and I'm not privy to all of the discussions, but I know that there are discussions going on about what this means. And like I say, specifically, and are there areas where we can do more dementia-specific funding calls? What was also notable, Adam, as well, was that everyone that I spoke to throughout the entire process, whether that be funders, the Dementia Support Group, the ECRs, there was a lot of reflection going on during the process. So, when we had these discussions, you could see funders going, oh, actually, we don't do that, but maybe we should. Those are opportunities I can take back to my team. So I think what we're doing is we're distributing the report. You mentioned, getting in touch with you. My email is on the front of the slide, so I'm really happy to hear from anybody, speaking to people, and then probably in 6 months following up and sitting there and saying, talking to the people that matter and talking to everyone that we've spoken to in the last 12 months and saying, okay, has anything changed? Have we managed to make anything better?
Well, thank you so much for spending the last year of your life immersed in this space to pull this together. I think it's a really important report. It continues to highlight applied research, continues to need new investment from research funders, not just those that already, to ideally encourage those that already fund applied research to continue to invest and increase their investment in this area, but also new funders that perhaps fund other areas to say this is a much needed area to attract, for funding. So please do consider, because clearly what the report demonstrates is that when you fund research in this area, it will attract the people we need. And I'll be interested. I think the DEM-COM fellowship itself will be going through some evaluation to look at the research outputs as well. So look at the impactful elements. And if you want to know more on that, go to our Minds in Motion podcast. I think we've published 8 episodes of this so far, where we talk to DEM-COM fellows and really get into the detail about their projects. And I've yet to come across one that isn't really meaningful and impactful in some way, whether that's from looking at hearing loss or lives of people in rural communities, or economics of understanding the value of interventions. It's an incredibly diverse program, and that's what I love about applied research, and this report does, I think, amazingly well in ensuring that continues. Thank you so much, Dr. Sarah Fearn, Dr. Paul Campbell, and of course, Professor Cathy Murphy, who sadly we lost at some point during there, but luckily after the presentation. If you'd like to know more on this topic or read the report in full, you'll find a link in the show notes, and do reach out if you have any questions. Thank you very much, everybody, again, and we'll call it a day for there. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.